viewpoint, statements, or beliefs expressed on the following program by the host, guests, or callers are not necessarily the opinions of FantasyAccess.com, Media Group Inc. ownership, management, sponsors, or website. We unleash the Wolf Pack as we get the latest in the NFL and the Miami Dolphins with our KSDT CPA Pro Football Report with NFL Network insider Cameron Wolfe. KSDT is one of South Florida's largest and one of the country's fastest growing accounting firms. KSDT CPA is a full-service firm that also excels in crypto. Visit them at ksdtcpa.com or call 305-670-3370. Here's NFL insider Cameron Wolfe.
There he is, and here we are. After all the cuts are gone. Yes. You know, Earth, Wind, and Fire has after all the love is gone. After all the cuts are gone. And a couple of trades and a couple of other things. Welcome aboard, as Cam and I both had very interesting drives home as we battle South Florida weather. But anyway, Cam, let's start off with obviously the Colt in the room, and that is Jonathan Taylor. It did not happen again. I didn't think it was going to happen unless if it's low-hanging fruit. Chris Greer is going to go like this. Oh, that's a nice fat one down the pipe. Bam! But if you want the end of the world for him or anybody, he's just not really overpaying that way. So your thoughts, what did you hear overall?
Yeah, I was not surprised. You know, it's a weird thing because you don't want to put a damper on people's hopes, but I have been pretty consistent with my reporting. And, you know, all I can do is go off my reporting. And I said from the jump, hey, they have interest in Jonathan Taylor. It was real. They were talking to the Colts. They do like him as a player, but it was at their value. And that was the important phrase. I sent that tweet out about a week ago, and people were like, oh, what does that mean? I'm like, does not mean that they're going to give a first-round pick up for Jonathan Taylor. I don't even
think they would have given up a second rounder unless there were some
I think that's right.
That comes with it, like, you want Ogba, then we'll give you the second rounder, you know, something like that.
So this was a situation where you have a team that says, hey, if the value's right, yes, we take another offensive weapon. If not, we're good with our group. And now they're good with their group. The Colts, I don't know if the Colts were ever super eager to trade Jonathan Taylor. And I think they wanted to be blown away, and it never happened. And so now there's a lose-lose situation. Jonathan Taylor probably feels like he's held hostage, and the Colts don't get any pick. And so technically they could still be traded, but Jonathan Taylor is going to miss the first 4 games of the season on the PUP list regardless. And so the Colts' hope probably, if they do trade him or do decide to trade him, is that a team's urgency increases. You know, a running back gets hurt. A team starts to struggle off the gate and say, we really need Jonathan Taylor, or a team that didn't expect it is really good and say he could be the piece that makes us, you know, a contender. That's what the hope is. But right now there's no resolution. And I'd imagine there won't be any resolution until he gets closer to off the PUP list and closer to that trade deadline, the actual trade.
By the way, it also gets hairy for them. Why do I say that? Because now when we start getting to the trade, here's where, you know, it's like Dolphin fans. Oh, well, no, let's go for the trade down. Well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. I might be able to get Derrick Henry for less than I get Jonathan Taylor because I have to give him a shorter contract.
Right.
That's what I have to tell. Maybe I only have to give less for. Oh, wait a minute. Josh Jacobs is available. Oh, let's talk. Oh, okay. You know, so all of a sudden, there might be a market of running backs. It's not just you're not going to be sitting there going, hey, I've got the only back available. That's the other thing that because Tennessee's rebuilding. They don't need Derrick Henry, to be quite honest. You know what I mean? They're just kind of going the safe route. Hey, we got some young quarterbacks. Let's take care of them with the monster. You know, we'll unleash the Kraken, and that'll make their lives a little easier. You know, that kind of stuff. Right. Which, by the way, this is a real bitch for Anthony Richardson. Yeah. This is like a really dick move on their part. Because if you draft a young man, dude, this is the NFL, bro. I don't care who you are. Take care of them. Build a line for them. Don't go Andrew Luck and let him get beaten up. Get weapons for young, like San Fran did. San Fran said, okay, well, you know what, bro? Let's go trade for the running back because we're not paying for quarterbacks or anything for years. Let's go get let's surround this kid. Let's make his life easy. You know what I mean? And they made Anthony Richardson's life a lot harder too in this whole mess. You know what I'm saying? At least for the first month.
Absolutely. I think that Anthony Richardson is a loser in this because he does not have a lot of weapons in that offense. It's Michael Pittman and really nothing else. Jonathan Taylor was going to be someone that took a lot of pressure off him. Now you'll see teams probably send a lot of blitzes out there and not really worried about the inside the box because Zach Moss is not going to scare you. Deion Jackson's not going to scare you. And so they're just going to try to make his life miserable. And so you essentially make your rookie quarterback and his transition much more difficult when you should be trying to make it easier, especially for a guy who doesn't have the experience like Anthony Richardson. And so I think this is very disappointing for the Colts. Very disappointing for Jonathan Taylor, obviously, who is having to sit out football games when he's healthy enough to play. This is very much a my back hurts unless I'm playing for another team, then my back is healthy type situation. But now that he has to sit out, things are it's harder for him to have the type of year he wants to have. Like he wants to get paid next offseason. Him not being able to get 1,500, 2,000 yards is going to hurt that pursuit because,
well, hey, they're consistent about mistreating their young quarterbacks. At least they're consistent on that.
Yeah. So this is a chaotic situation. But I want Dolphins fans to understand that I think that, I want to lead you guys the right way because I don't want people to feel like, oh, well, the Dolphins missed out on this. They were so close. This deal was not close. There was not a Dolphins Jonathan Taylor thing that we were an inch away, that sort of thing. Mike McDaniel has now said twice that he did not think about the Jonathan Taylor deal, and he's only thinking about it when it gets serious and Chris Greer brings it across his table.
Right, so that's when it gets serious. When Greer comes down and says to him, "Hey, we got this," then he knows it.
Right, and he's told us previously that's happened with Tyreek Hill. He told us previously that happened with Jalen Ramsey. Right, that has not happened with Jonathan Taylor, and so they did have interest, but it was to a certain extent, and they clearly didn't get to the level of, "Hey, we're going to make this deal. We're close to it."
We've broken it down this week on the show, and dude, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine the size of your nuts when Bill O'Brien continues to call you and adds another first rounder and another first rounder and a second rounder. And hey, we'll also take your receiver. Imagine how many times you have to deny that because I would not have ever gotten to the receiver. I would have caved in after the first couple of first rounders. Not this bitch. He's adding second rounders and then here's Connor Williams. Oh, we got him by the balls. They got no center. They only got me. We're gonna go in there and strong arm him, ask him for money. Oh shit, I didn't get any money. Here's Christian Wilkins. I explained this. I think I did it in the last segment with you. Quarterback, tackle, number one wide receiver, pass rusher, and shutdown corner. 5 most important positions in pro football, right?
Yep.
Interesting. Greer pays the tackle. He pays Ogba, Chubb. He'll pay Phillips when he comes up. He'll pay Jones. He'll pay X. He'll pay Jalen. So he pays the shutdown corners, right? He pays, who am I missing? The receiver. He pays Tyreek, doesn't he? Number one wide receiver, right? Sure, he'll pay Waddle too when he comes. And then Tua's coming up. Interesting that Wilkins has a hard time getting the money. I wonder what's the element missing from Wilkins' game. Oh, it's pass rusher. I see. And then so if you look at it, he's a hard-nosed negotiator. Dude, here's the other thing. When you start to think about what he got out of the San Fran deal and what he got out of the Houston deal, they are two of the best deals in NFL history since the beginning of this century in 2000. Over the last 23 years, those are two of the best deals in the NFL that guy has just bamboozled people.
Yep.
This is not a guy that's just all of a sudden going to just give you picks and give Jonathan Taylor a bunch of money, bro. What gives you that indication? And then he signs all of his running backs for less than what the fucking Jets paid Dalvin Cook. What gives you where is there any indication that this guy is Mike Tannenbaum or Oprah? You get a pick and you get a pick and you get money. This is a different dude, bro.
Yeah.
I don't think I think they're trained from the old Dolphins. Oh, let's just sign Ndamukong Suh. Let's just make the splash. I think they're kind of tied into that kind of irresponsible way of doing things. And that's not how these guys work, bro. It's just not.
So I think what's interesting about this day is everybody has an opinion, right? Like everybody's got an opinion on the Jonathan Taylor trade. Everybody's got an opinion on should they have kept this guy versus this guy? Why didn't this guy get the thing? These teams have a plan. And regardless of how every team thinks their GM, every team has a section of their fan base that thinks their GM sucks. A section of the fan base that thinks their head coach sucks, right? It happens every team. I'm sure the Kansas City Chiefs, there's some people out there saying Andy Reid sucks, that thinks that Brett Veach sucks, right? It's hard to believe, but there are a group, and everyone thinks they can do it better until you get into the seat and you realize the issues with it. And so I think that there are going to be some misses. There have certainly been some misses on this team. They got rid of one of them today, and Noah Igbenogany, a miss, right? But this is where I would say that other GMs are better. My thought, GMs are good at their job. My thought was, hey, you just got to cut this loss. Noah's a loss. You get rid of him. You cut him. Move on. Chris Greer calls around the league and finds a trade. And look, Kelvin Joseph has not been much better in his career. I'm going to keep it real with you. He has not been much better.
But I think he's a special teamer, isn't he?
I'm going to say you, but he has a different value, right? As a corner, he has not been much better. Right. But he played 70% of the Cowboys special team snaps last year.
Right.
Iggy played about 30%, and only because they really forced him to do that. He wasn't really a special teams player. And so you ideally get your special teams unit better. You save about $800,000 on the cap. Iggy was set to make about $1 million guaranteed. You get off that money. And guess what? If it doesn't work for Kelvin Joseph in the next few weeks, you can cut him for nothing. And so essentially, instead of cutting the guy, cutting your loss, losing $1 million, and just saying, hey, it's a sunken cost, you go out there, find something, and maybe he can help you as a fifth or sixth cornerback on special teams. Or maybe he can't. But either way, you try to salvage it. That's some of the work for a GM. That's finding things like for example, and Mike McDaniel had some fun with us today about this. You mentioned it briefly. Liam Eichenberg's the center in OTAs. And a lot of us are like, whoa, Liam's never played center before. What are we doing here? Like, is this really going to scare Connor Williams? The thought was less about Connor Williams, because I think they knew Connor Williams was going to come back, which he did. Thought is, what if we can get somebody cross-trained who may not be the starter here? And so they're thinking that all the way back in OTAs. And I think it sets the stage up for what we're probably going to have in week 1, which is Isaiah Wynn starting at left guard. And you're going to have Liam Eichenberg as a swing backup, as a guard and a center.
Oh,
and so
hold on.
Lester Cotton too. Both of those guys can play that spot. So
let me tell you something. And you know this, you follow the game, and I think a lot of our fans that are like hardcore understand this. How many centers in the league, or maybe in the history, do you ask to go find somebody after they snap the ball at the second level? Not really a lot, right? That's there are a couple of those guys. You know, there's a Kevin Mawai who went into the Hall of Fame that he can snap the ball and go find the linebacker out at 8 yards downfield and knock the shit out of him. Okay, that's fine. There are those freaks. We understand those kind of guys. But most guys play in a box. Guess who plays really well in a box? Cotton is, he's not really necessarily the perfect zone guy, but because of center, it might keep him more in a box where he can snap the ball and then go maul somebody. And that's kind of what you do at center. You snap and then maul somebody. And I don't know if he can play with the ball in his hands, because it does, going from center to guard is a lot easier than going from guard to center. So that's always more the challenge offensive line coaches will tell you. So that's the challenge there. I don't know about his history, because when they said that today, I was like, whoa, Cotton. And then I started thinking about it. Dude, he kind of plays in a phone booth. I kind of like this guy in a phone booth. And then as long as he doesn't get fooled on stunts and stuff like that, that Eichenberg gets fooled at a lot, don't know, man. There might be something there with the Cotton dude because he's a force, bro. When he gets his hands,
I like Lester Cotton a lot, and Lester Cotton's a cool story because I think if you ask people maybe 3 months ago, nobody really expected Lester Cotton to really make the team.
Right.
Thought is, hey, Lester Cotton, maybe he could work hard enough to get a practice squad spot. But he's a testament of if you just do things right, you play up to your level of talent and maybe even exceed it sometimes, then you get an opportunity. Because Lester Cotton's a guy who this is his 5th year. He's not an undrafted free agent, but he's a guy who had bounced around the practice squad of the Raiders, re-signed and cut and re-signed and cut, finally making it as a backup interior offensive lineman last year. Had to go on IR. Like, he's had a roller coaster journey just to be on an NFL roster. And so he probably was signed here as sort of an afterthought. Like, he gives us depth. He gives us somebody to be in the building. He was signed as a futures contract. Like, for people who don't know, they sign future contracts at the end of the season. These are guys who are going to fill up your 90-man roster. These are typically 81 through 90 guys who you're like, hey, I'd love to have them in the building, take a look at them. But most likely they're going to be some of our first cuts. He worked his way up from that to being not only a guy who makes the roster, but a guy who Mike McDaniel has in mind. He's an option as a backup center for me if things go bad with Connor Williams or if he gets hurt, right? And so testament to him. He's got a good spot on this roster, and I think that's why they felt comfortable trading Dan Feeney, who, by the way, I'm not sure if he makes the roster if he doesn't get traded. Like, he had some money there, so some money may be coming some issue, and they might have kept him just because he was owed a certain amount of money. But to trade him and get a 6th-round pick for it, that was an eye-opener for me. I mean, I know it's just a 6th-round pick, but I didn't think they were going to be able to get anything for a guy they signed in free agency who honestly
had wheeling and dealing, bro.
Who hadn't had a good camp. Yeah, so yeah, but you know, that's part of it, and that's why I tell you I gain more respect for general managers this time of year every year, and I think fans should maybe look at it a little differently too.
All right, so I nailed it. I gotta say, I said Brandon Peely, which I'm sure you did. And then I said Julian Hill's my 3rd best tight end. And apparently he's in that mix. And then my man Chris Brooks. Now, my man Chris Brooks, did he make it because of the injuries at running back? Or, you know, that's kind of what I'm worried about right now, because, you know, not everybody's healthy. A couple guys got and they're not serious injuries, by the way. I think they're all going to be ready for the opener. Well, except A-Chain, right? Maybe A-Chain's the one that
A-Chain's a little bit questionable. We'll see.
Right. A-Chain may not be ready, and maybe that's why Brooks will be there for you just in case. But what'd you think of the undrafted? What'd you think of the cuts? Who survived? Who didn't? Your thoughts?
Okay. Well, first of all, I will say this, because I hate this part of the process that people don't understand. This is the initial 53-man roster. And so a lot of times there are the quote-unquote great stories, and then tomorrow the Dolphins see a waiver claim that looks a little sexier. Maybe it's like, oh, man, Chris Brooks is nice, but this guy might be a little bit nicer. And then it goes from 3 undrafted rookies that make the team to 1, right? And so I'm talking about the initial, because this can certainly change tomorrow. But I think that it says 2 things. One, it says that they're telling the truth to players when they say everybody's got an opportunity. Because what we didn't talk about here is they cut 2 draft picks. They cut an offensive tackle and Ryan Hayes, who's a 7th-round pick, and cut a 6th-round tight end and Higgins. And so these are players they drafted, and they got beat out by undrafted players. And so clearly for them, draft value did not earn them a roster spot. Now, their 3rd-round picks, you're going to get a roster spot regardless. But if you're on day 3 versus the undrafted, clearly there's something that you have a chance. And I'll start with Brandon Peely, because he's a guy who showed up immediately. From the jump, he was consistent, and he was at a position of need. Like Big Fangio kept talking all off season. We need more depth. We need more depth. We're still trying to figure out who our 4th and 5th defensive lineman is. And this guy kept showing up. They brought in Deshaun Hand, who may be finding his way back at some point when he's healthy. But they brought in Deshaun Hand pretty much with the purpose of this guy can beat out. If this guy can beat out Peely, he has the experience, then we'll move on. And he didn't. Peely played better than Deshaun Hand, and he earned that spot, and then the Hand getting hurt helped him. And so I think that's cool. Brooks earned his way on with just being a bruiser, a different type of back. And then you're right, the tight ends, like all off season, we have not had any certainty of like which tight end is going to separate themselves. All that we knew is that Smythe was going to be on this roster. Everything else was up in the air. And, you know, Julian Hill beats out Tanner Connor, who was the hot favorite last year as the undrafted guy. And he beats out a 6th-round pick, a guy that was drafted ahead of him, that the Dolphins had on their board higher coming out of college. And he proved on the field that they were wrong initially and that they should keep him. And so I give credit to these guys because a lot of times it's a sad day. Guys are getting cut. Guys' careers are over. But I think it's cool for guys like the 3 guys you just mentioned who maybe went draft day and had a very disappointing day. They thought they were going to get drafted. They thought it was going to be a lot of champagne and fireworks. And instead they had to go undrafted. But they earned their way on to an NFL roster. And so
a lot of those guys you talked about, you know, if they clear waivers, you'll see them on the practice squad. A lot of those. Now, where you and I kind of missed out here a little bit, we talked about the 3 young linebackers. You had Miller on that good.
And none of them made it. None of them made it.
And again, practice squad, I'm sure 1 to 3 of them will make it onto the practice squad.
Absolutely.
But were you surprised that not one of them stuck?
I was, because I figured they were going to have another spot like linebacker wise on the roster, and they still may. What that told me is that none of those guys they felt like did enough to be worthy of a roster spot, at least initially. And so to me, that probably means that they're going to be looking at the waiver wire, and that could be a position, linebacker, where they're inside or outside. They say, hey, there's a guy we're going to take a chance on. And that's where I say maybe another guy gets sniped. Maybe one of the guys we were just talking about, or maybe another guy we weren't talking about gets sniped because you find a inside or outside linebacker from another team that you feel like is going to be a better fit. Because we talked about all 3 of those guys. Aubrey Miller, I thought he's had a solid camp, but not great enough that I'm like, he's got to be on the roster. Agude has had a lot of flashes, but I don't know if he had the consistency that you need from that spot either. And then Good kind of did both of them, but he probably didn't have enough high-end upside for them to be like, hey, we're going to keep him. And so instead you move on, and I'm sure there's going to be a pass rusher or inside backer they bring into that room because it's still a little light for me. And so you'll also see some moves tomorrow that'll open up roster spots. Expect Jalen Ramsey go to IR. Expect Elijah Campbell to go to IR. I'd anticipate Robert Jones, although he's not set yet because he may be about 2 or 3 weeks. So you got to decide, hey, he will be out week 1 and 2. Is it worth putting him on IR where he's guaranteed to miss 4 weeks so we get the extra roster spot and have him take his time, or do we want to just keep him on the roster until he's healthy? My thought would be, since you have Lester Cotton as a backup, you have Liam Eichenberg as a backup, you probably can afford to have Robert Jones on IR, and that opens up a 3rd spot. But keep an eye on guys like Tyler Croft, who was at practice today, even though he got cut. Perry Nicholson, who was at practice today, also despite getting cut. They don't have a second slot corner on the team. Cater's the only guy on that team that's healthy that can play slot. And so I'd anticipate another second slot coming back, whether that's Perry Nicholson, whether that's Bryce Callahan, whether that's another guy they find at waivers. I'd expect them to add another tight end to that room. And then maybe there's a linebacker in that area, or a safety they feel really good about adding as far as depth to kind of complete that group. So it'll be interesting to watch, but I think this is largely your 2023 Miami Dolphins.
One more thing before I let you go. You guys saw him in a press conference today. Christian Wilkins did not get the deal. And a word we like to use on our show is called compartmentalize. That you got to, and sometimes you got to compartmentalize. You know what I mean? In our business, sometimes we work the final year of our contract knowing, you know, and so that kind of stuff you have to compartmentalize, and you have to be a pro. Your thoughts on it, the message it could possibly send, those kind of things.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I actually asked him the question about that. Like, how do you balance it? Because I think it's easy for us on the outside to say, hey, you got a contract, just go play ball. These dudes are anticipating life-changing money. Like for Christian Wilkins, he could be having a $100+ million contract, or maybe it's 90+, whatever it ends up being, $80+ million contract waiting for him any moment now. but he doesn't have it. And so he's supposed to go to work every day and do his job. That's easier said than done. But the compartmentalize, I asked him the question of how you do that. And he said just that. He said, I have to compartmentalize. It's the business. I've got to give everything I got for Miami Dolphins. And I can do that because I'm looking at the face of the secretary. I'm looking at the face of the janitor, the PR person, my teammates, and they need me, you know? And so I believe him. And so I do believe it's been a little bit of rough negotiation because Christian looks at all these defensive tackles getting paid and he's like, why do you not view me like that? But I think it is some of what you're saying. Pass rush is not Christian's best strength. He's an elite run stopper. He may be one of the best, if not the best defensive tackle run stuffer in the league. Does not pass rush nearly the level of all the dudes who got paid. Your Quentin Williams, your Jeffrey Simmons, all of these dudes, you know, in that level. And so it's hard to create valuation. And so what it sounds like for me is that Christian Wilk is prepared to play his final year of his deal. And he's going to show people that he can pass rush. And then he's going to say, hey, Dolphins, either tag me or I'm a test free agency.
Right. Yeah.
And that's it.
He has to gamble on himself now, unfortunately.
Yes, that's it. That's essentially it. Like, of course, they can always negotiate a deal in season. But the Christian Wilkins I heard talk today seemed resigned to the point that, hey, you know, this deal's not going to happen, and I've just got to ball out. And that's it. I'm sure he and his agent have had conversations about it. And, you know, we can either take this deal we feel like it's not our worth. You can have your argument as a Dolphin fan. You can say, hey, you should take this. This is worth it to you. But you're not Christian Wilkins. You're not his agent. He has a worth of himself or what he thinks he's worth. And if it doesn't meet it, bet on yourself. I'm an advocate of betting on yourself regardless. If you think you're worth $500,000 and your company's only offering you $200,000 to do your job, bet on yourself. You know, if you got a contract, bet on somebody else to pay you more. And so I did think that it was cool watching just how emotional and happy he got for Zach Sealer, though, because that is a tricky situation, I'm sure, because you technically were supposed to be next in line. Like, you are the first round pick of this franchise. You've waited. This is your 5th year. You're supposed to be first, quote unquote, in line. They say they prioritize you. And for a couple months, negotiations just don't go the way that you want it to go. And they pivot to Zach Sealer, who was also on their list, but probably behind you. And they pay him. And this is one of your good buddies, but it's not you. And so it's easy to say, hey, I'm going to be happy with my friend. But when my friend gets a deal, and that I was not the same deal, but a deal that I was hoping for, it's hard, I'm sure. It's hard to have the same joy, the same enthusiasm, and not have any jealousy. And the Christian I saw today was so excited for Zach. He pulled him up on stage for the press conference and said, this is the guy y'all want to talk to. This is the guy. And he's giving him a big bear hug and everything. And so to me, I love that because I don't know if I could have did that. I don't know if I am mature enough in myself that, you know, that my buddy gets the deal and I'm still struggling to get it. And I'm
my buddy asked for half the money I want. So it's kind of also understandable. And so you can't hold it against him too, because you got to compartmentalize, you know, one for the other, because everybody's got to. That's easier said than done.
That's easier said than done.
Now, here's my only concern. And I feel bad for Christian in a way. Does he lose focus to the point of who he is, and then he tries to be who he's not,
right?
And then it leads to him not being nearly as effective to who he was originally, because he's trying to be something he may not be.
That's a great question. That's a great point. And this is something that, like, we'll only be able to see during the season. We're not going to be able to know yet. Because I asked Christian about it, and he's like, no, I'm going to have the best season ever. I'm going to be focused. But the reality of what you said is interesting, because that's why I say negotiations get a little sticky sometimes, because teams are trying to argue for their point and the player's trying to argue for his point. And part of the Dolphins' point, I'm sure, whether it was just the agent or if Christian heard it too, is, hey, Christian, you've only got X amount of sacks in this amount of years. You know, you have not had the pass rush numbers of player X. So that's why we have you valued lower than player X. And so regardless, you can either take that and say, okay, that's a challenge, or as disrespect. But either way, in the back of your mind, even if you're compartmentalizing the contract, you're going to be like, man, I need to get sacks. Sacks is what gets me paid. And so maybe I shoot this gap and leave my assignment. Maybe I'm supposed to fill the double team here, but instead I want to cheat in here and try to get the quarterback for a sack, because me taking the double team is not going to get me paid. Me getting 3 more sacks is going to get me paid, right? And so that's when you start to see guys get outside of the scheme to try to make plays. And there's some guys who can do that well and get away with it. I'm not sure. Not everybody can. And so I'm eager to see Christian. Christian has always been a huge team guy. Like, very rarely do I see him on film step out of his gap and say, oh man, he was just freelancing there to go make a play, right? And so I don't know if that changes this year, but that is something I'm going to watch, because that is natural. If somebody tells me, hey, if I get 8 to 10 sacks this year, I'm going to be worth $10 more million on the long term of a deal, maybe $3 to $5 more million a year on an annual deal, then guess what I'm going to be doing? I'm going to be hunting sacks every game. And so that's my natural thought process. Christian's probably a better guy than me and more of a teammate than me, but I guarantee you, whether he follows it or not, it's going to pop up in his head.
One more thing, just for everybody out there. If Austin Jackson turns the corner, because he has had a solid camp, and if he can't hold the spot and man it for the year, I know everybody picks on Iggy, and I know they like to face 2020, but if Austin hits, and if Tua is a hit, and as long as he stays healthy, you've hit on 2 of your 3 first-rounders. And you found Robert Hunt, Raekwon Davis, and Brandon Jones in the same draft. Because too many people focus on the 3 first-rounders, and then they look at the other 3 players that have been very good players overall for them. Well, I say Raekwon's been solid. He hasn't, this is a contract year. It'll be interesting to see if he turns the corner this year. But overall, the draft is good with or without Jackson. But if you get Jackson and you got your franchise quarterback, are you kidding me? And then the 3 picks after, I just want people to remember those other picks, because this Iggy thing always brings up 2020. You know what I'm saying?
I think NFL GMs, whether they admit it or not, would take a 67% hit rate on their draft picks. And so it's 2 out of 3, right? And so if you look at it in the spectrum of
50, they'll take 50.
That's what I'm saying. I'd say on average, most are 50-50, especially first round. It decreases when you go second, third, fourth. But I'd say most first round, you look at first round picks in the average draft, you can say it's a 50% rate. Like, go pick your favorite draft. Let's look back 5 years to give it time. And if you consider a success is that these guys have been multi-year average or better starters, I won't even say that. I would say multi-year good starters. To me, that's all I need. That's considered a success for me. Multi-year good starters. Don't have to be Pro Bowl. Don't have to be all pro. Multi-year good starters. To me, a Robert Hunt quality player, right? Robert Hunt's not been a Pro Bowler or an all pro, but he's been a good player, right? Tua, same token. Tua has not been a Pro Bowler or an all pro, but when healthy, he's been a good player. And so I would count Tua as a success. I would count Robert Hunt as a success. Austin Jackson right now is probably leaning towards the not success, but he has a chance to resurrect things with another successful year. And also, Ibn, obviously, he was not a success.
But Brandon Jones was a success up until the injury. He was turning.
Right. I'd say right now he's closer to a success than a failure. I still would want to see another year, which is why I say 5 years is a good avenue to look back, because how we're looking at Brandon Jones is off of 2 years, right? And so it's a little different, 2 or 3 years. And same with Raekwon. We're 2 or 3 years, and right now I'd probably lean Raekwon towards a little bit less of a success than Brandon. But 2 years from now, we could be looking at it opposite and say Raekwon Davis had the best season of his career. He had 2 in a row, and he locked it down. And so to me, obviously the pick of Noah is going to be a miss. They could have taken Jonathan Taylor. Yes. But all this is revisionist history. And to me, I can't fault them. I can fault them with making the pick and the player, but I can't fault them with the thought of positional value, because we talk about
they were planning ahead, because eventually you have to plan for Jones and X's departure.
Yeah, and they thought X was going to break. They thought X was going to break, and they were wrong. But
Jones failed, and that would have been the hit for you to move him in there. And by the way, That's what they're doing with Cam.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. You cannot have enough
term, dude.
You cannot have enough cornerbacks. You cannot have enough pass rushers, offensive linemen, and quarterbacks too. Like people laughed at the Eagles for the whole quarterback factory thing. And then they draft Jalen Hurts. People were like, well, what are you going to do with Jalen Hurts? He's sitting behind Carson Wentz. You have your franchise quarterback. They didn't plan it this way. But 2 years later, Jalen Hurts is the franchise, and now he's signing one of the biggest contracts in NFL history. And so that's valuing the high positional value positions because you just never know. And so I think that the thought process was good. They just drafted too raw of a player, a guy that they probably reached for on the traits, hoping that he would turn out, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work. And the other thing is when you have 3 first-round picks, I think you have a higher risk level because you're thinking, hey, we don't usually have 3 firsts. And so they took some risk. One completely busts. One looks pretty good as long as he stays healthy. And the other one, the jury's still out. And so I think that's roughly 50% right now. But we'll see.
All right. Follow him on Twitter at Cameron Wolfe. Catch his exceptional work there at the NFL Network. Cam, as always, my brother, appreciate you. We will catch up later on in the week. Thank you.
All right. Sounds good, man.
This has been the KSDT CPA Pro Football Report with NFL insider Cameron Wolfe. KSDT is recognized by Forbes as one of the top tax accounting firms for 2022. KSDT CPA is a full-service firm that also excels in crypto. Visit them at ksdtcpa.com or call 305-670-3370.